Welcome to Discovering True Health, where our goal is to provide you with cutting-edge health information through research, interviews with experts, and personal journeys to true health. Our message is a message of hope and healing, and our mission is to bring you on a journey to discovering true health, to not only find wellness, but to thrive. Hello, and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all our upcoming shows. We also have a lot more great information on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. All those links are below. So today we'll be learning about how to improve our lung health and how bioactives can help heal and support damaged lungs. Now, I've spoken about my own journey as a COVID long hauler on this show quite a bit. I've had ongoing inflammation issues and lung and microvascular damage that really decreased my quality of life, and my lungs are still not fully healed. And I know that so many of you out there are still struggling with lung damage from COVID or other chronic illnesses. So this is such an important topic, especially right now. So today we'll be learning some of the ways to support and help with healing the process of lung damage, and generally how everyone can keep their lung function as strong and healthy as possible. So my guests today are Anna Campbell and Darcy Schack, founder of Zest Wellness, where they've worked together to develop natural products to support immunity and general health. Their first product they created was a nutraceutical called Exhale that has immune boosting bioactives that help reduce inflammation, phlegm, and support your immune system and lungs. And we're going to learn all about that later. Anna Campbell has her PhD in plant biotechnology and was managing director of a science and technology firm. And she holds science business directorships in New Zealand, the UK, and the US. Now, Darcy Schack suffers from an inflammatory autoimmune disease that affects multiple organs in his body, mostly his lungs and lymph glands. And his health journey led him into looking for plant compounds that would help complement and sometimes replace the pharmaceuticals he was taking. So thank you both so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Now, Darcy, you survived a harrowing event that literally had you fighting for your life. Can you share with us first a bit about your journey with your chronic illness, and what are some of the most important things that you learned about lung health and comorbidities and root causes of health issues in your research?
Yeah. So 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with something called sarcoidosis, which is basically a autoinflammatory autoimmune condition. And how that all started, I believe, was when you talked about long COVID, I believe that my sarcoid actually started in much the same way. So what started happening is I actually went back to Canada because I'm Canadian. So I went back to Canada for a holiday with my family, and I got really sick from a virus. And I was so sick that I couldn't travel for probably 3 to 4 weeks. And I ended up staying in Vancouver and just couldn't travel. Came back here, and for 6 months, I just did not feel good at all. I just had no energy. I had lethargy, just all that kind of stuff. Over the next 6 months, my energy started to increase and pick up a little bit. But I noticed that I had trouble breathing, and I kind of always had asthma and stuff like that. But I ended up going to the hospital because I was starting to get hypoxic, and I had like little sort of those stars, and I realized that I was kind of just above consciousness. And a couple times when I'd have a coughing fit, I'd actually pass out. So I went to the hospital, and they basically told me it was all in my head, but they were going to do a lung x-ray, and they did a lung x-ray. And I looked, as he was looking at the lung x-ray, and he looked, and then he looked over at me and he looked back, and then he got another opinion on it, and they both looked at me. And as soon as they both looked at me, I thought, oh no, I'm done. And so anyways, they came over and said, we're just going to bring you upstairs for a lung biopsy. Because there was just a lot of like clouding and stuff like that on my lungs. And I said, what do you think it is? And they said, well, lymphoma or sarcoidosis. No idea which it was. And basically, so I went up and had this lung biopsy, and it was a very interesting sort of experience. And as I was laying on that gurney, sort of my life, because obviously, you know, you go to the worst possible thing of what it's going to be, and never Google lymphoma when you're waiting for a lung biopsy.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so I realized that if I got out of this scrape, that I was just going to learn as much as I possibly could about it. So what had happened, fast forward a number of years, and you know, thousands and thousands of research articles later, and what I had come to was that inflammation is actually the smoking gun at the scene of every crime. So inflammation is quite possibly the genesis of every disease that pretty much exists today, and that the gut microbiome is more important than anybody else had previously given it credit for. And so those are the two things that I kind of took from it. In 2019, just before COVID started, I had a heart attack, and so I wound up in hospital again. And the number of medications that I'm on, the number of things that I'm on, was actually quite significant. And I'd go in and go get 2 shopping bags full of medications from the local pharmacy. And it was kind of one of those things where I realized that I was going to have to take my life in my hands. I was going to have to research and just find out absolutely everything that I could find out about my illness. You know, you stated that you had long COVID, and you know, long COVID is one of those things that I think sarcoidosis, in a certain extent, tuberculosis, and long COVID they have extreme similarities. And I believe it's the immune system that's sort of under attack. And when the immune system is under attack, I believe that your body responds in a very certain way. And so most people won't experience the symptoms. Then there's potentially a genetic component where people who have that genetic component, and then you have that environmental side of things, you have that virus, your body just responds in this completely inappropriate way. It saves your life. However, it keeps going, and the damage can be quite extreme. So my journey has basically been just, you know, realizing that there are certain things that I can control, but everything that I can control, I'm going to try and research and mitigate, because I believe we're ultimately responsible for our own health.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to listen to your own inner guidance and follow it. I mean, that's what saved my life with COVID. So, and
Absolutely.
it's crazy because it sounds like, you know, you talking about kind of what you went through sounds so similar to being a COVID long hauler and the way it kind of unfolds, you know.
Well, and you know, when you're in bed for 18 hours a day and you have no energy, and you know, you just don't have any gas in the tank, there is nothing that you can do except look for answers. Because you know, there are many things that I'd rather do than lay in bed for 18 hours a day. And you know, that's the thing. And so a lot of those symptoms, I think that you know, the COVID long haulers have had, like what you've had, not only is that not imaginary, but that is also one of those really important and fundamental things. And I believe the inflammatory pathways are so almost identical that there's evidence that's starting to support that, which is actually why we've developed some of the products that we've developed, just because of that type of situation. And again, you lift yourself up by your bootstraps and just take full responsibility for yourself and go forward.
Yep, that's what we have to do. I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. And you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's definitely, and like you said, Anna, the inflammation is the culprit. And it's this constant inflammation response, which what causes inflammation? The immune system. So that must mean, okay, the immune system is continuing to overreact and continuing to react when it shouldn't be reacting and actually doing us harm now. So it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Again, that's why we've looked at inflammation as the root of all evil, so that if we can help mitigate that inflammatory process, then we potentially have a chance where our bodies can heal. So it's sort of having a circuit breaker in that inflammatory process. And I think that's where real breakthroughs in medicine and pharmaceuticals are actually going to happen in the coming years, is to deal with that inflammatory process and downregulate it.
Absolutely. And you brought up too the microbiome, which the microbiome was only discovered in, what was it, 2007? It's so recent. We don't know much about it, but now we're realizing how important it is. We're more, more of that than are actually DNA.
It's
And
mind-blowing. Yeah.
the importance of it, and the little we know, but how pharmaceuticals can actually destroy it. So it's this like balance to figure out, okay, what's going to work and what's going to harm it more at this point.
Totally. And I think the biodiversity of your gut microbiome is also very important too. Like I know living in Canada, some of the things that were important for the gut microbiome wouldn't really happen. You'd have fast food, or you'd have something, and you'd have all these derivatives of corn. So inevitably you were eating derivatives of corn. So your total diversity was actually limited to probably 4 or 5 species of vegetable
What the data is sort of showing in terms of our modern diet is that in terms of the plant species we eat, where 80% of our diet is 3 to 4 plant species, and that's rice, corn, potato, and wheat. And if you think back to hundreds of years ago, the hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle, they would have been gathering, especially the women. So the men might have done the hunting, but the women would have been out gathering seeds and grains and leaves and anything that they could eat, and that would have been very seasonal. But when they've done analysis of ancient microbiomes and compared them to now, we are literally half of the sort of bacterial biodiversity that we would have been hundreds of years ago. And so there's more and more evidence coming out now to then increase the biodiversity of our microbiome. We really need to increase the species that we eat, so that we should be eating something like 20 to 30 plant species a week. Wow. Which is not actually as hard as it sounds. So I remember when we first came across that and we went, oh, that's a lot. But by the time you throw in seeds and grains and different vegetables, but it is something that we have to challenge. And I remember running it past a bunch of guys that I knew, and they said, well, how about we turn it around and eat 20 to 30 species of meat a week? Yeah. And so they tried to go out fishing and do all sorts of things, but they didn't make it. So it's actually a lot easier to increase our the biodiversity of what we eat by really growing our plants that we eat.
And how is it hard? Like you talk about how the amount of different types of what are they called in species in the microbiome?
Yeah. Yeah. So the bacterial species, they rely on prebiotics. So prebiotics are really, really critical. And essentially what prebiotics are different types of fibers that mostly come from our plants that we eat. And so there's soluble fibers, there's partially soluble fibers, there's and all different types of plants have different types of fibers, and different types of bacterial species thrive on those different types of prebiotics, those different types of fibers. So if we have the same, rice, corn, and that rice and corn is really highly processed, so most of the fiber's gone anyway, then the bacteria species that are going to survive in our guts are not going to be the ones that are necessarily going to help us, and they're the ones that start contributing to the inflammation that Darcy talks about. As opposed to we start, having a diet rich in different fiber types, different prebiotics, then we really grow the different types of probiotics or good bacteria that we need in our stomachs.
So having less of, you said the study, back in, many years ago, we had a lot more diversity. Now we have very small diversity. What's kind of the implications of that health-wise to have a less broad diversity of them?
Well, our immune system is gonna suffer, and so I think ultimately our immune system is going to suffer. The types of secondary metabolites that our body needs. So those microbes are going to break down those foods. They're going to break down certain things, and they're going to give us essential nutrients. And if we don't have those essential nutrients, we're going to suffer, and our body's going to suffer, and ultimately it's going to lead to an increase in inflammation, increase in a bunch of other things. So I think that's one of the key places, and that's where, when we started researching, that's what we found, is the gut microbiome was very important in that inflammatory process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's actually where our immune system lives. So, I mean, that's kind of, it controls everything in our bodies. It's really what controls
And the
it.
first, that ultimate, in terms of your first reaction to immune response, and it's a great reaction. So our first response when our body is exposed to a pathogen is to inflame and to send out, the good guys to get the bad guys, right? But it's when you're constantly evoking that inflammation signal. So somehow that signaling's gone wrong. So you keep inflaming even once the danger is past. And that's what this constant inflammation process is causing.
And that's what your, study, and you kind of are focusing on that crux right there, that crux of an overactive immune system, kind of figuring out how to keep that from happening or support it. So
and not only just that, but so our products, what we're trying to do is have a certain antimicrobial and antiviral component to them, which basically so it think of it like a shield in Star Trek, where you can have I work Star Trek into everything. That annoys Anna. But that gets with the shields, what that allows us to do is it allows us to fully make repairs on our ship, or help our bodies to heal, and not be constantly, because when you get sick, you have the ability to get sick easily again. So I'm sure having long COVID, you would pick up pretty much everything that's going around, right?
Well, and we're just precarious. I would wake up and just feel sick out of the blue for no reason. I mean, all of us have. I mean, it's pretty insane. I mean, if I walked 10 extra steps today before, I would wake up the next day being like, oh no, I'm getting sick.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. So that component of it, I think, is really important, to just allow your body time to heal as well. So that's sort of the type of thing. And I think the reason that we developed the products that we developed were simply because, I'm alive. I'm still standing. And that I know Anna gets sick of me saying that I'm alive, but I pretty much say that.
I feel you.
I lived.
I get it.
Yeah.
Especially when you did the work and you kind of forged your own path to get.
And that's definitely part of it. But I can't discount the pharmaceutical part in it, because the pharmaceuticals really helped get that inflammatory process to a state where I was more able to control it. But from there, it's pretty much up to me. So I walk longingly by the pie shop, and my dark beer and pie days are over, fortunately, but unfortunately at the same time.
But I think, can I just, it is really interesting, because I'm a pretty well person. I haven't suffered chronic disease, and I've learned through this journey, through walking along, starting to work with Darcy, but also talking to a lot of the people that are using our products that are suffering from chronic illness. I've learned the phrase Spoonies, which I never knew before, right? But it actually, I think, for someone who's suffering a chronic disease, they're dealing with it every minute, every hour of every day. And for someone who doesn't suffer from that, that's very, very hard to comprehend. And so it is really hard to comprehend when people keep talking about being unwell, because you're like, well, when I get sick, I get well again. Yeah. And so this is something that I think is really important that both sides understand, or especially people like myself who are well, that we understand this kind of daily battle, and really try and get to the root of what is causing that, rather than just saying, oh, it's all in your head. Or what we hear a lot of is, well, you're female and that's just part of being a female. For things like endometriosis and fibromyalgia and some of those types of irritable bowel disease, that predominantly affect females. And sarcoidosis, the disease Darcy suffers from, predominantly affects females. So there's something going on that has been ignored for too long, and I think it's time that, you know, as a much wider community, both medical but also those of us on the ground in science and those walking the street, we start asking questions and we start, you know, really looking for solutions.
Absolutely. And you know, I had a woman on talking about endometriosis, and you know, a lot of this stems from, like you're saying, inflammation, but what can also cause inflammation? Stress. What is stress? Emotional stress. There's psychological stress. There's emotional stress. There's, you know, and a lot more women are prone to that just because of our makeup. So,
yeah. And the kind of roles we take. So I've got 3 teenagers and I'm going through perimenopause. And so I'm awake at 3 a.m. when my wonderful husband is fast asleep.
How do you fall asleep so fast?
Yeah. So I mean, these triggers in our lives, and it's all very well, I think, to say, well, reduce stress in your life, but how? And how do we work together to do that? And how do we support each other through both environmental stresses, but also physical and body stresses?
Absolutely. Now, Anna, you have an incredible background. Can you share a bit with us about your background and kind of what brought you together and inspired you both to create your company, Zest Wellness?
Yeah, so I come from, I actually come from a medical family. So my dad was a medical doctor, and his mantra was always really interesting. And his mantra was that for every $1 that we spend on preventative medicine, we save $6. And so he was always very, very critical of medical systems for not spending enough on prevention of disease in the first place. So I've been brought up with that kind of thinking. And then my act of rebellion in my family was doing botany and doing a PhD in botany and getting my doctorate that way rather than medicine. And so I have a PhD in plant biotechnology, and right from early on, I've always been really interested in plant bioactives and the role they have in our diet, but also in food systems. And the science company that I was in and then ran for a number of years, we worked in food supply systems all over the world. So I was really lucky and able to travel to countries like China, Brunei, India, Sri Lanka, the US, and and the UK, and see food systems, and they're right from woe to go, right from the start to the finish. And and I always have this sort of joke that there's nothing that excites me more than walking into a factory or meeting a new plant. And so, just as an example, I'd never seen a pineapple growing, and I got to see these pink pineapples in Sri Lanka, and for me that was just it was just these are the kind of wonderful moments then that we always tend to think of food as something we see in the supermarket, but I get to see it right from the start, and that's really cool. So working in food systems all over the world, just more and more aware of how we're moving away from sort of locally grown food systems into these big mass produced food systems. And in fact, huge percentages in most countries of food that we eat has crossed a border of some description. So in New Zealand, we produce a huge amount of food and we export 95% of it, but we actually import a massive amount of what we eat as well, because we export dairy and meat, but we import just about everything else. And so this is happening globally, this kind of globalization of the food systems. And so I find, so to cut a long story short, it's this kind of interest which has driven me to where I've got to, and really understanding, well, how do we look at what we used to eat? How do we look at some of the traditional medicine, Ayurvedic type medicine, and combine it with modern medicine? So it's not an either or an or, but it's well, how do we take the best of both worlds and develop a new path forward? And so I was working actually doing a project on cannabis breeding, so breeding cannabis plants to have different types of cannabinoids and terpenes. And that was when I ran into Darcy, who was working for another company that was involved in that project. And we hit it off. We talked science way too much and bored all our peers. And then we started saying, well, actually, we should start turning some of this into a business. And then COVID hit, and we said we need to turn this into a business fast. And so we, in April 2020, we started Zest Wellness.
Wow, the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah.
Right now with this, with your first product, Exhale, and we're going to get
and it was definitely escalated because of the current environment. But we had been researching plant bioactives and lung health for quite some time before that. But it was a genesis, the catalyst, that we needed to really get moving, because we could see that these types of products are needed.
It's interesting you brought up Ayurvedic. The system, because my next show is on that. I have
great. I'll have to listen.
Coming on. I was just researching it, and I'm like, it's 5,000 years old. It's the oldest healing system known to man. I mean, it's incredible. And like you said, it's incorporating all these things together and pulling all this wisdom from Eastern and Western, and taking it all and kind of meshing what works out of both.
And I think it's not to say that the modern pharmaceutical system is wrong, but it is quite, scientists approach things from what I call a very reductionist view. Yep. So we like to get down to the very single molecule that affects the very single gene or the very single disease or, function. And we know our bodies, we've just talked about the microbiome already. So we know our bodies are much, much more complex than one compound, one gene, or one compound, one pathway. And so the concept that the challenge that the Ayurvedic people have, or plant-based medicine have, is that they can't necessarily protect the IP around their products because they are complex. So you can't drive a clinical trial that understands multiple compounds and their effect on multiple pathways in our body. The clinical trial would just be absolutely ginormous. And so that type of medicine has lost out. And now I think we're saying, actually, no, we want it back, because we realize what this kind of singular focus is doing to our bodies. And so we do want it back. And also, I think it's really fascinating that up to about 50% of modern pharmaceuticals are actually derived directly from plants or from a synthetic analog. So plant medicine is still the basis of a lot of pharmaceutical medicine. And in terms of the whole world's population of plants, we've actually only screened 6% of them. So there's a whole lot out there which we know nothing about, and that's hugely exciting for us.
Absolutely. And there's so much about the body we don't know a lot about, like the microbiome. So, it's a learning process, and keep learning and keep figuring it out. And like you said, it's so important to approach the body in a holistic way, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to take this little thing over here and tweak it, and pinch it or pull it out. That's going to affect like 50 other things.
Well, also on top of that too, so modern pharmaceuticals are great for sort of singular purpose things. Like prednisone is an amazing anti-inflammatory, but it has a lot of side effects. I call them the devil's Tic Tacs, as do a lot of people, because they're just evil. However, they keep you alive. But how you got into that situation is how you're going to have to get out of that situation too. So it's not going to be just a one thing and you're out of it. You're going to have to change diet and lifestyle, and you're just going to have to adapt to your new norm. And that's the one big thing that I've found, is that, some days I have really, really great days. Some days I have really average days. But even on those really average days, I can sit out on the back of the deck and just watch the sun go down with a cup of tea and be entirely happy, and realize that, you can sort of shift the goalposts. I used to think that I could absolutely do anything, and I was very driven. And this sort of changed my perspective on things, and now I'm just happy to be here. And so I think that gratitude is a big part of the journey. But realizing that you also have to change the environment that you're in. So it's not just the one compound, it's the multiphasic approach, including the plants and everything else.
I think that's such an incredible point, because I think a lot of us are shifting more towards preventative, like you said. Like, how did you get in this position to have to take those devil's Tic Tacs in the first place? Well, probably had a whole ton of stress. You weren't taking care of your gut microbiome, or paying attention to your diet. I mean, really shifting and focusing on prevention. The medicine's great. The pharmaceuticals are great if we get there, but let's focus more on prevention and mitigation before we get there.
Yes.
All right, so let's start with the basics about lungs. So what's the importance of, good lung health and the functions of the lungs other than the obvious, which is breathing? Because I know
Well, that's
that I don't know.
Yeah. So if you look at each lung, it's about, so your lung capacity is about, if you were to take all your lung tissue and spread it out, the diffuse space would be, so the area where you actually diffuse oxygen into your body would be about a size of a tennis court. So that is the volume and total area that you have to sort of metabolize oxygen and to get it into your bloodstream. So your lungs are only one cell thick, and that oxygen, basically you oxygenate your blood through your lungs. So oxygen is literally how we live. Oxygen rich blood. If we don't have oxygen rich blood, we're in trouble. So the idea is, when you start losing lung capacity, you start losing the ability to diffuse oxygen. That's going to affect absolutely every system in your whole body. And it's just down to that. They are absolutely critical. So if you lose your lung capacity, you lose your ability to diffuse oxygen. If you get scarred lungs,
take it out.
Yeah, and to take it out, to remove the gases and everything else. So, we're sitting here breathing like it's absolutely nothing, but there's this huge physiological and chemical reaction that's actually happening while we're doing it. And, you probably became aware of yourself breathing after I said that. But it's this whole autonomic sort of system that just functions basically by itself. And if you get a layer of mucus that affects that, and so if you affect that area where the oxygen diffuses, or you get too much mucus, or you get scarring, you start to totally take away your ability to that gas exchange. And it's just as simple as that. And it doesn't need to be really any more complicated than that, other than how do you protect your lungs? Your lungs have their own microbiome in them, and they have their own sort of homeostatic environment. We have mucus in our mouths and in our throats and stuff. And the idea is, and hairs in our nose. And the idea is we're trying to trap as much of that pollution and dust and everything else to stop them from getting into the lungs. And then we have, the immune system, which protects our lungs pretty fully. But you start losing the ability for some of that, and that's where it happens. And that's why, like COVID with the pneumonia, your lungs fill up with water, and you basically, immune
Drowning on your own lungs.
And you drown, right?
Yeah. I know what it feels like from the inside. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. And that's why lung health is absolutely the most critical of those sort of, it's both an internal and an external system. And so basically that's why it's so important, and to not damage that system in any way.
Absolutely. And now, what happens when our lungs do get damaged? And I know, Anna, your brother had some really incredible study on this. Can our lungs, can we improve our lung function once they've actually been damaged? Is that possible?
Yeah, so this is really groundbreaking, really new kind of work. So my brother is a cancer geneticist. He heads up the Sanger Institute in the Wellcome Trust in the UK, and they did a lot of work where they were trying to understand just how many cigarettes, for example, does it take to cause a DNA mutation. So that was the kind of sort of work they did in terms of understanding the genetic analysis and the mutations that you generate over time with smoking. But that followed on to some more interesting work where they really were looking at the cell regeneration and what happened with really bad pathology, and then what might happen afterwards. And what they found was with smoking in particular, that once you stop smoking, yes, you've done a whole lot of damage, but what they found was actually really, really exciting is that they called them these bunker cells, that these bunker cells actually, even though there were all these damaged cells around them, somehow once you stopped exposing yourself to that physical damage of cigarette smoke, these bunker cells were able to regenerate and slowly start to grow. And and almost and to say, because there's debate around this, can you reverse scarring, can you reverse lung scarring, can you reverse lung damage? But this kind of evidence is showing, well, it may not be fully reversible, but you can definitely do things to start improving that the lung mobility and the lung function once you have damaged it. And Darcy's done a lot of work really in trying to understand lung scarring, and then understand what might be happening and how you might reverse it. So it might be good to throw over to you.
Yeah, so that's where we came to our product Exhale, was basically so we use products in there, and they basically, so as you consume them, they go into your stomach and into your liver, and then basically are distributed from there around your body. They actually help to nibble away some of that inflammation and some of that lung scarring. Yeah, so what we found was that there is actually evidence to show that you can reverse some of that. And so we've been really trying to understand that whole process and understand how it's going to be really sort of important for people in our condition, actually, who need to sort of reestablish their lungs and good lung health, and increase their lung capacity too.
It's early, but it's I guess it's hopeful. And one of the things I think when you're suffering from something like chronic disease, and is that you want to be able to work out if there's a way that you can improve, because that gives that little light of hope. And I think as well, we've kind of lived in this society where people have said, well, smoke is, tough. You've smoked all your life. It's your fault. And it's like, well, that's a pretty simplistic view on the world. We all do things that we probably shouldn't at all times of our lives. And, smoking's highly addictive. Nicotine, they're designed to be highly addictive products. And so, rather than just blame everybody, it's to say, well, actually, we have come from a premise of, well, wellness is a journey that is important for all of us, and it doesn't matter at what stage you realize you need to go on to that journey, or you need to improve your wellness. It doesn't matter whether you're 70 and you've smoked for 50 of those years, as my grandmother did. She then gave up smoking at 70 and lived another 10 years, which is kind of mind-blowing. And when I say smoke, she chain smoked. She never didn't have a smoke in her mouth. She lived for another 10 pretty good quality years. And so I think our point is there should never be judgment on the path that people have come. What we need to create a path, that little shining light, and use science and empathy to really find, those types of products and the types of lifestyles that we need to shift to.
Absolutely. And that's interesting, because, I agree. It's also not giving our bodies the credit it deserves. Our bodies are these incredibly made things. And it sounds from this study that they have this sort of survival mechanism built into them.
Yeah. And I mean, Darcy and I have a joke, because I sing this song, the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone. We all know that song, right? But in the research that we were doing around probiotics, we found that probiotics, which are the good bacteria, and our body's filled with those good bacteria, but our mouths are filled with good bacteria as well. And what the data was showing is that good oral probiotics, so good oral health, is connected to good heart health. I mean, it's crazy how everything is connected, that everything literally is connected. So we should make a whole microbiome song. Maybe that's
absolutely yes.
something we could do.
And add inflammation and stress into it.
Yeah.
Now let's get into talking about bioactives. Darcy, you mentioned a little bit, and when you were speaking just previously of how they can help with lung damage. So how can bioactives help those with lung damage? And from your research, why are they an important aspect when it comes to lung health?
All right, well, I'll go into our product a little bit, which is Exhale. So we use a blackcurrant and a boysenberry extract. And there's a company out of Auckland that's done a lot of studies, including the New Zealand government, on lung health and boysenberries. And so when we saw that, basically there's these little things called M2 macrophages, and they sort of activate those, and it's part of your immune system. Basically, and it'll nibble away some of the inflammation that's in your lungs. That's one of the first things that has shown that you can actually get rid of potential lung scarring. Up until that, it was considered permanent. So we started reading that research and we started developing products around it. So basically what we have is we've got a blackcurrant and a boysenberry that, again, once you consume them, they go into your pulmonary circuit and they start nibbling away the inflammation. They start nibbling away some of the things that shouldn't be there. And on top of that, we've got so that's that part of it.
That's mostly the anthocyanins.
The
so the
anthocyanin
anthocyanins are what make fruit and vegetables purple. So that's really critical part of that. And those anthocyanins are also antiviral as well. So it's a kind of a double whammy, double bonus. So eat lots of purple things. Carry on, Darcy.
So yeah, the anthocyanins are, it's the other things. You've probably heard of free radicals. Yes. And the anthocyanins are actually free radical scavengers. So they're an antioxidant. Now, what's important about that is that once you have an inflammatory process, and that inflammatory process in your body is switched to that pro-inflammatory response, they're an antioxidant, and they can help mitigate some of that pro-inflammatory response and that damage. Yeah. So then another thing that we have in there, which is another powerful antioxidant, is a product called quercetin. So quercetin is basically it comes from a Sophora japonica tree. It's also very prevalent in capers and onions. And it is another powerful antioxidant, but more importantly than that, it is what they call a zinc ionophore. So it actually helps transport zinc into the cells. And zinc's really important because it actually powers and is the foundation of our immune system. So when you have the anthocyanins and you have zinc and you have the zinc ionophore, which is quercetin, it actually allows that zinc into the cells. But the benefit also to quercetin is it's quite antiviral and it's quite antimicrobial. So that was the foundation of where we started. We have since we started on a liquid product, so it's like just a little bottle like that. And we've since gone to a lozenge, and in that lozenge we have now included a probiotic, which actually has been shown to also be very antiviral and help protect your oral biofilm, and it's antiviral and antimicrobial. And they did a study in Wuhan, China on COVID, and they found that people who had been taking this probiotic for 10 days didn't get COVID anymore. So, and that's a published study, and it was actually peer reviewed by the Center for Disease Control. So yeah, it was very, very good, very, very good study. So basically we went on the premise that if we've got a really good antimicrobial, antiviral product in our mouth, but also helps increase the efficacy and increase the strength of our oral microbiome and biofilm. We then have the anthocyanins, which are going to sort of scavenge free radicals and quite known scientifically to help heal lung damage. And then on top of that, the quercetin, which is a zinc ionophore, and the zinc, that's like a whole little package that's going to help us to start to get to a place where our bodies can start to heal. And that's how we started.
Incredible. So the liquid has all those ingredients minus that extra probiotic that the oral.
Yeah.
And how often are those with like lung damage taking?
Well, I take 2 a day. Anna might take one.
I take one a day, and I tend to take them if I feel like I've been exposed to a virus or something like that. But whereas what we're finding, a lot of people that are taking the lozenges, they're tapping 1 or 2 a day, so they might up it to 2 if they're if their symptoms are worse. So it might be they might suffer from something like COPD, that kind of broad umbrella of diseases. And if they feel their symptoms are worse or they're getting exposed to something, they'll up to 2 or 3 a day.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking that when
Yeah.
you mentioned that, Darcy, about it actually being researched and people weren't getting COVID. So yeah, if you get exposed, you could, because it apparently latches on to the cells in the back of the throat or in the nasal cavity.
Yeah, so the bliss, they call them bliss probiotics, and bliss stands for bacterial-like inhibitory substances. And so what these bacteria do is that they're kind of what we call the good bacteria, and we want them to colonize our mouth and our throats and our lungs and everything else. So we want those good bacteria. So if we have these probiotics every day, then we expose our mouth and they colonize our mouth. And they act in 2 ways. So they crowd out the bad bacteria. So they just stop the bad bacteria being able to colonize just by being there. But they also put up these little inhibitory substances, these bliss, that's why it's called bliss, inhibitory substances that actually can kill or inhibit the growth of other substances like viruses and bacteria. So they're pretty cool. And again, like there's a huge body of work gone into this, led by a Professor John Tagg, who's at our local university here. So we've known about these for a long time, huge international research, but we're just, tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. We understand some of the things that are going on, but we just don't kind of understand why or how. And they're the kind of things that we're trying to follow to be the next step. This is our first product. We've got other products now. What are going to be the next iterations? Because we want to keep innovating and keep improving to produce the best products we can for people who suffer these kinds of challenges.
That's so incredible. Most of us have heard about take probiotics for your gut, and you take the pill or you drink the solution, but not many of us have heard about probiotics for your mouth.
No. And, another area that this is kind of crazy, I'm going to go to the other end of our bodies, which is really, which sometimes is a little bit awkward, but, vaginal health is really, really important for a lot of women. And more and more data is showing that women who suffer ongoing things like thrush and urinary tract infections, they have really poor vaginal biomes. And so there's ways we can improve that. And instead of just kind of throwing all these pharmaceuticals down our throats, which are not going to really generally help our biome, what can we do to improve the biomes of all our regions, whether they be vaginal or oral? And so there are these really good proactive preventative strategies using both prebiotics and probiotics that we need to be using on a daily basis and making part of our diets, but also part of our supplements.
Absolutely. And that's fascinating about those that are researching the microbiome. They're trying to figure out ways to use the microbiome, like you're just saying, we add a little bit more of this to the microbiome, or take a little bit of that out of the microbiome, and see if those tweaks will make a difference instead of dumping pills down our throat, like you said.
And the challenge is that probiotics are alive. So when you take a probiotic, it is a living organism, and so you can damage it in the stomach, for example, and so there's all sorts of ways of delivery. But also we can't just take one probiotic or one prebiotic. We need to be taking a variety because we want that diversity. So we want to promote that diversity of bacterial species.
I love that you guys are doing this work and this research. Darcy, what types of results have you seen with your chronic illness and lung issues using Exhale, your product? And also, what kind of results and feedback have you been seeing from your customers and those that are taking it?
Our feedback has been absolutely amazing.
It's been it brings us to tears quite regularly, and we've been really surprised by that, but it keeps us going.
Yeah, and I've gone from not being able to do very much to increase my lung capacity. I was part of a high intensity interval training clinical trial at the local hospital, and basically training with another friend of mine who is chronically ill. We're going to do a triathlon because we might be the slowest ones on the day, but we're faster than everybody on the couch. Okay. And so basically that just sort of taken my life back slowly. And
You can
exhale is
reduce your
actually,
steroid.
oh yeah,
Yeah. So
I
that's
haven't
really
had
important.
I haven't had steroids for probably 2 months. I was on them for 7 years, off of steroids. Actually, when I was coming off of steroids, or coming down on a big drop, I walked into the grocery store, and I saw that the tuna wasn't dolphin friendly, and I burst into tears. So my wife is like, she's like, that's okay. It's all good. So yeah, steroids really mess with your emotional state.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm glad I'm not on them anymore. And took me 7 years to get off them. But yeah, so I've actually come down on immunosuppressants, and I've come down. So I'm still taking some immunosuppressants, but I'm down. And my goal ultimately is by 2024 to hopefully be off all of, yeah, phase them out. So I'm on some pretty heavy ones.
Wow.
And slowly just taking them down, just to allow my immune system just time to wake up slowly, not just wake up and want to kill me.
Right. And we have a bit of an internal joke because the color of our logo and everything like that in a business is pink, and everyone says, oh, is that because you target women? And we said, no, because pink means health. You use the phrase in the pink of health. And so Darcy has a joke that, am I looking pink today? Because for him, pink means oxygenation and health, as opposed to you're not getting enough oxygen, you look vaguely gray and sometimes
green. People would ask me, they're like, are you all right? I'm like, no, I'm really not.
So pink, he's in the pink of health compared to what he was.
Pink lungs, right?
Yes. We are chronic illness warriors. And just to be even considering doing a triathlon, I mean, good for you. Congratulations. That's a huge, just to even have that in your thoughts that you're planning to do it. That's huge. That's absolutely incredible.
Well, and again, you got to do everything you can to try to just continue down that path. And I want to die when I'm 95.
But it is one step at a time, isn't it? I think why you have those big goals, I think it is that it's the little things. So at Darcy's house, he's got these horrific stairs. Like you walk up to his house, and I'm gasping, and I think I think just to get to the top of those stairs every day at some points in Darcy's life would have been, that would have been an accomplishment.
Well, that's why we moved to that house. Everyone's like, why did you move there? And I'm like, well, because it has these 50 stairs and we have to go up like 200 feet off the street to get to our house. And they're like, why would you do that? I'm like, because if I want to get to bed, I got to go up those stairs.
Yep.
And if you're chronically ill, you'll understand setting that target. And that's the best place. My favorite place is in bed. So I have to climb those stairs to get to that bed. And everybody is like, you're nuts, man. I'm like, well, nuts, but I'm alive. So
yes. Brilliant. I mean, for me, it was walking my dog every day. No matter how sick I was with COVID and gasping for breath and how low, like I was get dizzy if I took a couple steps, I would walk my dog 3 times a day. Even if I could only go a half a block, I would still do it. So
and your dog would have loved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the best sick buddy.
And if anyone can teach you to live in the moment and not worry, it's a dog or a cat, I think.
That unconditional love in the moment. Yes, they're the best. So now bioactives are really important and incredible for, healing lung damage and supporting the lungs. Are there any other practices or things that we can all implement to improve our lung function?
I'd stay away from anything that's pro-inflammatory, anything that's going to create inflammation. I'd stay away from sugar. I'd stay
highly processed
foods. Change that, slowly change it and slowly work out of your diet. Everyone's going to have those days where you're like, I need a bucket of ice cream, right? Fair enough. But you just slowly start to change, and it might be just one thing. It might be one thing you take out of your diet and introduce something that's got some good fiber to it, and slowly. So it's one of those things where if you change quickly, you're never going to adhere to it. Doesn't matter how healthy or how sick you are. I'd say just slowly change the direction of the ship and slowly chart yourself a new path.
And similar, I guess, with exercise. So the lung is a muscle, so it needs love. It needs it needs exercise, just like our biceps. If we want to have big guns, we have to, lift lots of weight, right? So if we want to improve our lung function, we need to find ourselves our equivalent of Darcy's steps. So, or a dog walk, and just, I think, if you can go 500 meters one day, 550 meters the next, then that's fantastic. I've just started running again, and while I said I'm generally healthy, I carry too much weight. It's not easy to go running for me, but I'm gradually, every day I've got a Fitbit watch, and I just when I can gradually run just a little bit more, and I'm just trying to just little steps, and pat myself on the back, and then do it again tomorrow.
And even if you're chronically ill, you can still do that. You can still climb a flight of stairs. It might take you 8 minutes or 10 minutes, but you can still climb the flight of stairs, and it's still going to give you just a little bit more, and just do a little bit more. And it might, take 5 more steps than you feel like you can, and just push yourself a little bit. And, I think that helps wonders, because often when we get chronically ill, we stop, and we have to because we have no choice, because it's the situation's untenable. But if you can just do just a little bit more, even when you don't feel like it, your bodies are going to thank you for it. And like you say, if you walk your dog 3 times a day, imagine what you would be like if you didn't walk your dog, mentally and physically. And that little bit of extra physical activity, that extra little bit of time, and the fact that your dog probably just goes bananas for going for a walk, because they all do. And it's that, even the de-stressing side of that is just huge. So it's slowly starting to change your life for the positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's being in the sun, being in the fresh air,
Absolutely.
all those aspects to it. And you mentioned earlier, purple foods. Are there any specific foods you could recommend that we should all be kind of loading up on, that support and help the healing process of our lungs and just lung health in general?
Yeah, I think look, any fresh fruit and veggies are really, really important. There are sort of superfoods like blueberries and broccoli that people talk about a lot, but I think the more that we can eat in terms of that variety. So if I said there was a superfood, it's really, variety is my superfood equivalent. So if I sit down to a meal and I can sit down, I can count my species, then I'm feeling really good. And I think if you could start thinking like that, then that's a great place to be. Because even products like beans and things, they're full of great fibers. So it just might be, I love those poke bowls where they have, this trend towards poke bowls. I think that's really cool, because it's actually variety on a plate. And so, there are great foods like boysenberries, blueberries, blackcurrants, broccoli, walnuts are really interesting for things like heart disease. There's so many great compounds out there. I always struggle to just find 1 or 2. So eat them all.
Variety, get your macros.
Yeah.
So important. I've recently just worked with a doctor on that, a holistic doctor. So she's changed my diet, and I'm doing all the different species now. What a difference. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
It's changed my life. I mean, I had a hard time after COVID, because my body was carrying a lot of extra weight, and I've always been very fit. At first I lost a lot of weight, and then all of a sudden I gained weight, and I just, all right, I need to go back to the gym. I thought I was eating healthy, but I thought I was eating healthy because of what I wasn't eating.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, but I'm not eating sugar. But I wasn't eating the variety. And as soon as I did my blood testing and figured out what my food allergies were and cut all those out, because that cuts out inflammation, and added doing the 30 different types of fruits and vegetables and macros and micros a week, all that weight just disappeared.
Yeah. It's mind blowing. Yeah.
Incredible.
And I think as well, when you have a mentality of cutting some or not having sugar, or what you just said about it's not what it's about. It's quite a different mindset to a positive mindset where you say, oh, look at this, the wonderful colors of my plate today. That's such a great feeling. I've got red
an
and
abundance.
orange. Yeah.
And that's
It's
what I
quite
started feeling. I'm like, wow,
yeah.
like, suddenly I feel like there's more abundance in my life because now I've got,
Mm.
6 different veggies in my salad.
And I follow all those Insta pages where where people are doing these beautiful plates of colorful everything, because I get inspired by that, and that's a bit of it's something that you just got to work out what is going to inspire you to get into the kitchen and put those sort of meals together.
I think that abundance thing is actually really important too, because then you don't look at the things that you're missing.
Yeah.
Because I remember I had a doctor who said, I don't think you should drink alcohol. And I didn't really drink alcohol, but all I wanted to do after he told me that was drink alcohol. I'm like, that's the craziest thing.
Right. It's that rebellious thing. It's like, now I can't do it. Now I want to do it.
Yeah.
That's all I can think about.
It's crazy, all these little mindset shifts. It's like I had a weight loss, a specialist come on, and she was talking about mindset and saying, you don't say good or bad food. You say higher dense nutrient food or low dense nutrient food. And if you eat a bunch of, I don't know, processed French fries or something, that's low dense. So just eat a bunch of high dense nutrient food for dinner.
Yeah.
So what are your future goals for your nutraceutical product, Exhale? And can you also share with us, you said you have other products you currently have available that you've developed besides?
Yep. We've actually developed an oral health product, which has 2 different types of microbes in. So basically, or probiotics. They help with the colonization,
the
good bacteria, basically, and it helps stop things like periodontal disease. We've got another product around heart health. Having a heart attack makes you realize how important your heart is. And so we've developed a heart health product, and we've developed a brain health product. We've got a gut health product, which is coming out probably 2-3 months, maybe more, maybe 4, but we're just getting the science and making sure that it's just a perfect product. We're also looking at products around flipping the body from a pro-inflammatory back to an anti-inflammatory state. So we're looking for a overall arching product, which we're just
really
researching now, which gets to the root of it all.
That's a way. And I think in terms of how we, so we're really trying to have a business where we are direct to consumers. So we are having that relationship with consumers, that we answer questions and so forth. And so that kind of model is really important to us, rather than go into a wholesale sort of environment. So we do deliver products anywhere in the world, and we're also setting up a company in the US so that we can get products to people more quickly. So that will hopefully be in the next 6 months, which is really exciting. And Darcy's North American, so he's very passionate about the area and the region.
Love Mexican food. Wow. And they don't have it in New Zealand.
Yeah. Not well, they do, but not so good. No. Apparently it's not so good. So
maybe I should come and open a Mexican restaurant. That's a great business opportunity.
Oh my goodness, yes. Please.
Interesting. Well, that's exciting. So you have some great new products coming out. I'm so excited about the work you're doing. And so where can we find your products? And do you have any other great resources on your website that we can all check out?
Yeah, so our products are on our website, zestwellness.com, and that's Zest with 2 T's, so Zest, Z-E-S-T-T, or Z-E-S-T-T, wellness.com. And we blog regularly. We're just starting to do a lot more, podcasts, talking with fantastic people like yourselves. So we'll hope to, get those types of discussions going, our regular blogging, and we just want to keep talking to people like you and talking to other experts and just spreading the word really around people starting this wellness journey from anywhere, taking control of your health from, wherever you are, whatever path you've taken.
And claim your life back from long COVID. Like same with sarcoidosis, it is something that I have, it doesn't define me. And for too long, I let it define me. And that's what we, as people who are Spoonies or long sufferers of anything, what we need to know is that we might have a disease, but it doesn't have us.
Yeah, and same. So thinking about that language, I remember Darcy telling me there's different states of sarcoidosis, and so one of the states is, I forget the name of it, but, and I'm sure you'll correct me, but it's not a good outcome. It's a pretty grim outcome. So there's people giving out there every day that people are saying, well, you've got this percentage chance of living, or you've got this percentage chance of this being a long-term thing, and it's like, well, how do you flip that language back?
Yeah,
because they're pretty grim kind of conversations.
and to quote Han Solo from Star Wars, never tell me the odds.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I always say chronic illness warriors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, because you
Yeah.
wake up and you fight to do everything, where before you just like spring out of bed and like, I'm gonna go do this. Now you're like, okay, now I need to plan this out, but I'm still gonna get there.
Yep. I can only do 2 things instead of
Yep.
8, but I'm going to get those
Right.
2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel you. I'm there with you. And so are many people. Well, I'll post a link below to your website for those that want to check it out. I'm definitely going to try it myself, since I'm still, battling this, COVID long haul stuff. Before we wrap it up, do you have any final words or thoughts for anyone that may still be suffering with lung disease?
I do. Never, ever, 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 ever give up. Never. Don't ever give up. Never, 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 never. Like, just don't even, that's not even your vocabulary. Keep going. Don't give up.
And probably find your people, find your people that lift you up and help you find that path.
Yep.
Find your people. They're out there.
And never give up. Not ever.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and research with us on lung health. And, as someone who's suffered with lung damage, I know how detrimental it is to your life. And there's so many out there that are suffering, especially right now. So thank you so much for all the great work and research you're doing on behalf of all of us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It's been fantastic.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about your body, the better you're able to stay healthy and prevent disease. And a quick reminder, I'm not your doctor, so please don't take this as medical advice. If you have specific questions about your specific case in healthcare, feel free to reach out to your practitioner. And if you like this video, please like and share it with others. This information could really help someone you may know. And also don't forget to hit that subscribe button to be sure you don't miss out on our future shows. And stay tuned for the next episode of Discovering True Health.